All right, so to finish this project, maybe I'll use this 50 weight because that's thicker than Tex 30, or is Tex 30 thicker than 40 weight? But what is Tex to 40 weight? I don't know. I better call Juki Junkies. I don't know what's going on. Hey guys, welcome to episode 5 of the Sewing Junkie Lab. I am your solution scientist, Boki, and in today's episode, we're gonna clear up the confusion around Tex threads, industrial threads, weight threads, what's the difference, when do I use them? So we're gonna go over a lot of really important stuff in this video. Like, this is an information-packed video, so get your notepad ready, get that pause button ready so you can take notes as we go along. Let's talk about what you're going to learn in this video today and give us an outline for today's video. So first thing we're going to talk about is what is Tex thread and what is weight thread. Second thing we're going to talk about is how we can convert those numbers to each measurement that you need. So how can we convert weight to Tex and Tex to weight? Number 3 is to know how to use your Tex thread on your machine and also understanding what are your limitations that you can use on your computerized machine or your Juki TL machine. Number 4, when to use Tex threads over weight threads. How do I know when to use them for certain applications? I'm going to clear that up for you. And then number 5, lastly, is also a really important one when it comes to working with industrial threads on your machine, or really any thread on your machine, is knowing to use the right needle. So I'm going to give you some needle recommendations too. And just like you guys, I also need to refer to my notes because, like I said, this is an information-packed video and there's a lot of things I don't want to miss. So let's talk about what's Tex thread versus weight thread. Let's start with the Tex first. Tex is going to be a more standardized, direct type of system. It's more consistent, it's more used like nationwide and all over the world really. And you'll understand that when we start talking about the weight. So industrial thread, sometimes when you think of Tex, we think it's more industrial, but that's not always necessarily true. There's a really wide range of Tex threads that you can buy. It's just another way to measure the thread. So how do you measure it? Tex equals the weight in grams of 1,000 meters of thread. All right, so let me give you an example. Tex 40 means that in 1,000 meters of thread, it weighs 40 grams. All right, so the nice thing about Tex as well is that the higher the number the Tex thread gets, the thicker the thread is going to be. So it makes a lot more sense, right? So Tex 70 is going to be thicker than Tex 40, Tex 90 is going to be thicker than everything we just mentioned. So it's a lot more simple, it's a lot more intuitive, right? Another thing that's really nice about Tex thread is that it's going to be really practical for high speed type of sewing machines. So that's why a lot of people who are sewing on industrials like to use it. The TLs work great here too. And remember, it's not just really thick. There's a wide variety of Tex measurements, but they're made a little bit differently and made to withstand that high speed intensity sewing that we find in TLs and faster machines like industrials. Now let's move on to weight threads. Weight threads are more commonly used in our home sewing world. So when I said in the beginning of this video, let's talk about Tex threads versus weight threads or home sewing threads. That's kind of what we're referring to. The one thing that's a little confusing about this category is it's a little bit more confusing. There's a little bit more opposite going on here than the Tex type of system. This is more common in the US. It's not like accepted all over, so it's a little bit harder, and that's why we get that question a lot about some companies working in Tex, some working in weights. So we're going to go over those conversions here in a second, but as far as weight threads goes, it's a little bit more confusing. It's a little bit more of an indirect system of measuring the thickness of the thread. So here's an example. 50 weight takes 50 kilometers to weigh 1 kilogram. So another example, 60 weight takes 60 kilometers to weigh 1 kilogram. So it measures how many kilometers of that thread need to equal 1 kilogram. That's how weight's measured. So think about it. Thinner thread needs more, right? So that's why the 60 weight needs 60 kilometers to weigh 1 kilogram. So that's why in this system it's opposite. The higher the number, the thinner the thread. So when you look at Glide 40 versus Glide 60, Glide 60 is actually a thinner thread than Glide 40 is. Unlike in the Tex world, it's a lot more self-explanatory. So that's why this system is a little bit more confusing. And also another thing to note, with weight threads, since it's not so standardized like Tex is, sometimes you'll notice like little discrepancies between threads, like home sewing threads. Like if you look at one brand's 40 weight and another brand's 40 weight, they might look and feel different, although they're the same. So a little bit different, a little more confusing, but hopefully by the end of this video, it'll make more sense. All right, so now let's talk about how to convert those numbers into the system that makes more sense to you. So if you're trying to get from weight to text or text to weight, it's a really simple formula. This formula stays the same. I don't know why it took me so long to realize this. It's really, really simple actually. So if you're trying to convert your text into a weight thread, all you have to do is take 1,000 divided by that text number will equal your weight. Same thing for the other way around. If you're trying to convert your weight thread to a text thread, the same formula. 1,000 divided by the weight equals the text. So a couple examples for you is going to be for a thread weight that's of 20, that's going to equal approximately a Tex 50. And I say approximately because you're obviously taking two different types of systems and converting them. So you might be like, you might have like little decimal differences here, but approximate numbers here, okay? So another example, a weight thread that's 40, so much like Glide 40, that's going to convert to a Tex 20. So again, remember how I mentioned, we always think Tex means a super industrial type of thread. There's a wide variety of Tex threads. It's just a different system that we're all not necessarily used to. Some of you might be, depending on where you are watching this video. Another great example is thread weight of 60, which is a really thin, fine weight thread, is going to convert to like a Tex 14. So really, really small number, right? It's really confusing. It's opposites here. So if you're looking for a Tex 50 thread, you would want to look for a weight thread about 20. All right, so very simple formula. Use that, and remember it's always opposites. For weight threads, the higher the number, the thinner the thread, and for Tex, the higher the number, the thicker the thread. Number 3, we're going to talk about how to use this and how to know your limitations on your sewing machine. So it's always really important that you take time to obviously read your manual of your sewing machine. Regardless if you've been sewing forever or if you just started sewing, every machine has its own little quirks and tips and things that we always need to adjust and learn. It's just like technology. Technology is always changing, and you always have to take some time to understand how to use it. Same logic applies here with your sewing machine. So always look inside to see what your range is. What is your capacity of needle and thread, right? So perfect example, on the Juki computerized machines, for example, like in the DX7 or like the F600, you're going to notice this little chart that it gives you. It's kind of like a little reference chart. It's really great. And you'll notice in the denim, it says you can use thread weight number 30 to 50. All right, 30 to 50. So 30 weight is the thickest thread you could use on this machine. Very confusing because it's a very small number there, but that would equal about like a Tex 33 thread. However, you can always kind of work a little bit up on this depending on your machine, depending on your confidence too, but you have to keep in mind the needle range that is available on the machine. For these computerized machines, the biggest needle you can use is a 16, so you can't really venture out into this really thick thread, A, because the machine's not designed for it, but B, you can't also accommodate to that thick thread because you're not using a big enough needle. So you could probably get away with using like a Tex 45 on this machine. You just really have to know what you're doing and always do a test sample and run things really nice and slow. But that's how you would reference your manual to understand that. Same thing for the TLs. We always say Tex 70 is the thickest you can use on that machine. Again, we've gotten away with using a little bit thicker thread too, but it just kind of is how you set up the machine, how you feel comfortable. You know, it's not something that's talked about in the manual, but always take that with a little bit of a wiggle room and adjust it as needed. And if you ever have any questions about what you can and can't use on your Juki TL machines, always feel free to reach out to us via email, via phone number. All that's going to be down in the description below. Another great reference that I'd like to mention to you guys, some previous videos that we've talked about these very topics, is first video that I want to talk about is David's tension video. So that video can be followed along to understand how to balance the tension on whichever machine you're using, whatever thread you're using. A little bit more specifically though, on the Juki TLs, we do have a video geared just for how to use industrial threads on the machine and balance it and do those extra little steps that you might need to get the type of stitch quality that you're looking for. So check out for those videos down in the description below. I highly recommend that you watch them because they're going to go over these specific things much more in depth. Another thing I'd like to also note that on the computerized machines, there actually is an optional accessory that is a bobbin case that is specifically tensioned for thicker threads. It's really great, and you can use it on your F series all the way up to the DX4000. I'm going to have that linked for you below, but that's really nice because if you're familiar with the Juki TL, you know that the bobbin case is adjustable. You can adjust the tension on the bobbin accordingly, use a TOA gauge to measure it, or just by hand doing the drop test. So So that you have a lot of control on the TL to play with tension. On these machines, not so much. It's much more computerized. You have, your tension dial that you can adjust for that part, but you can't really touch the bobbin tension. So I highly recommend if you're somebody who's going to venture out into those thicker threads, like a Tex 30, Tex 40, number 30 thread, that you get that to make the sewing experience a little bit easier and your stitch quality real nice and crisp. Next thing we're going to talk about, number 4, when to use these threads. And this is probably by far the most loaded section of this video because there's so much room to decide when you want to use these threads, but I'm going to give you just kind of an idea to get your mind, get your creative juices flowing. But remember, take this information with a grain of salt because each product, each project has a different outcome look that you might be wanting or a different structure or purpose that you need it to do. So keep that in mind, but take this information and kind of interpret it as you go, okay? So let's talk about weight threads first because weight threads are most commonly used on our home sewing machines, so not industrials. Also, like I mentioned in one of the previous things that we talked about as far as knowing your limitations, right? Same logic applies on an industrial sewing machine. So industrial machines are much more higher speed sewing machines and a lot of the times they can't use home sewing thread. Not to say they don't, but always understand your limits, okay? So same logic for home and industrial machines, all right? So for our home sewing threads, our weight threads, a lot of these are our most commonly used threads. So if you follow us and you know JukiJunkies.com, you know we offer a wide variety of threads, one of those being the Glide 40 weight thread. This is a 100% polyester thread that is fabulous. We use it for all kinds of projects. It's a 40 weight, so it has a little bit more body than most threads do. Most of the time people like to use 50 weight threads, and it being a polyester thread, it's gonna offer a little bit more strength, right? So let's talk about when to use different weight threads within your sewing, all right? So a 100 weight thread is going to be extremely thin, and most sewing machines can't even sew with this, but that's gonna be for very, very fine, detailed work. So that also kind of applies to 80 and 90, which is actually like the thinnest thread you can use on most of the Juki home sewing computerized machines, all right? Now moving it up to something like a 60 weight thread, which we carry, our Glide 60 weight thread is a very fine type of thread. It's ideal for lightweight fabrics, it's ideal for thin, fine embroidery or very layered embroidery where you don't want the threads to really pile up on one another. It's also really great for your bobbin tension, for decorative stitching, kind of helps reduce the bulk. If the thread gets very thick, it can get hard for those stitches to look good, right? Moving on to a 50 weight thread that can come in cotton, which is very common. We have Cairo Quilt, which is our 100% cotton thread that's 50 weight, and that's very commonly used for quilting, piecing. It's almost everybody's all-purpose thread. And that can be used on a wide variety of different things. Moving up to our 40 weight, like I mentioned in Glide, it being polyester is gonna make it stronger, but it's also going to be a little bit thicker, right? So this is gonna offer a little bit more strength. This is gonna be great for home decor, for napkins, curtains, pillows. Also really nice for everyday garments too. So like 50 weight and 40 weight are going to be nice for those everyday garments, things that get used a lot. The stitches need a little bit more flexibility to, withstand the motion. If you use a really thick type of thread, that's not going to be very, productive for you. It's not going to make a lot of sense for that piece. So these are going to be really nice for things that need a little bit more flexibility, a little bit more movement. You can also put together your bags with this depending on the material that you're sewing. So if you do like you're assembling your bags and maybe your outside is canvas and the inside is cotton, or the outside is vinyl, the inside is cotton, Glide's going to be a really great thread because it is 40 weight polyester. It's going to withstand it, but then you can start getting into those industrial threads when you start using thicker, more meaty type of fabrics, also vinyl and cork, but we'll get there. But remember, there's a lot of room for interpretation in these. So these are just kind of basic outlines for you. Then moving into that 30 weight thread, which remember is the max on a lot of the Juki computerized machines. This is a much thicker thread. This is going to give you that more sashiko, hand stitch kind of look. It's more decorative, right? It's going to be better for heavier embroidery projects. Maybe you want those stitches to look very defined, very thick, and have a lot of body. 40. That's where you'd want to go, right? And then 12 weight, which you probably can't, or you can't use on these machines, but you could venture out into this world in your TLs. That's going to be very, very thick. Thick threads are going to be also nice for top stitching, adding more, you know, pizzazz, much like you find on your jeans. The top stitching on those jeans is very thick because that was the goal. You want to see that beautiful stitching. It's going to be a part, it's going to be a personality, it's going to be a final look to that product. But they didn't use that thread for the construction because those jeans are worn every day and they need to be flexible and they need to withstand the wear and tear and washing of the jeans. So that's a perfect example to kind of put that in your mind. Something like jeans uses two different types of threads depending on the look and the purpose it needs. Before we start diving into the text uses, that text world of those threads, I'm going to throw up this really nice comparison chart, or not really comparison chart, a reference chart, if you will, that you can find in your Juki computerized machines. I think I pulled this one from the DX7 or the DX5. Here you're going to find much more specific examples of fabric. So from lightweight to medium weight to heavyweight, kind of breaking it down, you'll see that it gives you some needle recommendations as well as types of thread recommendations. In that lightweight world, you see we talk about some of those fine fabrics like lawn, wool, synthetic fabrics. Refer to this as a great chart to use and kind of give you an idea. For really delicate fabrics, you're going to use really thin threads here, like it says, number 80 and 90. And then if we're looking at the medium weight category, which is cotton and synthetic fabrics, light jersey, ordinary wool, and other synthetic fabrics, that gives you a little breakdown. You can see here we start talking about 50 and 60. I definitely would throw in some 40 weight in there too. And then looking at our heavyweight materials in here, you can see denim, jersey, and like a coat fabric. It references some good things in there for you too. So this is a great place to start and refer to, and it's read in your manual, and that's what it's there for. So now let's talk about text threads and when you would want to use those. So like I mentioned, in those high-speed sewing machines, you're going to really like this because it's much more like abrasion resistant. It's going to withstand that high intensity sewing that you'll find in those types of sewing machines. It can go through strain, right? It can go through lots of use and durability depending on the type of industrial thread or text thread that you're getting. It's going to be really nice for people who do leather and vinyl work, top stitching on your bags, things like that. It's also really nice for top stitching, like I mentioned. This is a really great place to go when you're looking for something that needs exposure to the elements, meaning outdoor projects, outdoor upholstery, sailboats, golf carts, things that are going to be in the elements, outside, in the sun, right? We'll talk about that here in a second. So let's go over some more specific examples. So remember, like I mentioned, text comes in a wide variety too. It doesn't just mean super, super thick, coarse thread. So something like a Tex 20 weight thread is also going to be ideal for garments and delicate fabrics. But at that point, you might as well use some of these home sewing weight threads, right? Also, because that's primarily what's found here in the States. Tex 30 is going to be more general sewing, right? It's going to be a little bit thicker, but it's still pretty thick. You're not going to want to piece with something like that, right? So Tex 50 is going to be ideal for denim, upholstery, and bags. So what we offer here at Juki Junkies is something like the Fusion Tex 45. This is going to be, or not this one, this one that's on the machine, the Fusion Tex 45. This is a really great place to start if you're looking for something to use, like you want to get in the industrial world, but you don't want to use anything super, super thick. This is also a really great thread to put together bags if you're working with lots of layers. So if you are working with like cotton canvas, denim, things that have a lot of structure, a lot of layers, tactical bags, this will be a really good one to use for the assembly as well as the top stitching. Or if you don't work with anything that thick, but you want your top stitch to look good on those maybe more lighter weight bags, this is going to be beautiful. It's going to give you more pronounced stitching. And I have some really great examples today, so I'm going to show you those as well on different materials, so you kind of have an idea of how that starts to change and look and shift on different materials too. And then Tex 70 up is going to be much more heavy duty. We do carry Tex 70 as well in a little bit of colors for you on the website. We even carry some 90 and 135 on the website too. Some of those are UV treated, some of those are bonded nylons, some of them are like more treated. So check those out on jukijunkies.com. You can always reach out to us too, and we can go over those different options if you're trying to find the right one for your project. But we have a wide variety, all the way from Tex, or from weight 60 weight all the way up to Tex 135. So a really wide variety of things here. So Tex 70 is going to be for much more heavy duty projects, leather, canvas, cork, things like that. And then sometimes in the world of like really thick threads, like 90 and 135, those are going to be very, very thick threads. And those are going to be much more decorative serving for you. Like if you look inside of a car or like a golf cart seat or something, or boat seats, those layers aren't necessarily thick, but they are there because they're meant to be decorative, right? Like there's nothing like walking in on a boat and those stitches are really nice and crisp and they have a design on them. That's what that thread is for. It's also going to be like UV treated, so it's meant to withstand that. So, you know, the Tex world industrial style threads are a little bit more geared for that industrial element of sewing. And I have some more specific examples I want to talk about, because you'll notice that industrials, there's nylon and polyester, and I want to just give you a little bit of an idea of what's the pros and cons to that. So let's talk about nylon versus a polyester thread really quickly. I don't want to go into this super deep, but just to kind of give you an idea of what's what. So comparing nylon to that polyester thread, this is also going to have a really nice high strength, a little bit less though because it's less stretchy. It doesn't have as much flexibility as that nylon thread does. The one pro to this though is it's definitely going to have a high and excellent UV resistance. It's also resistant to molds and chemicals. It can handle the elements a lot better than a nylon thread can. It's also abrasion resistant, but the nylon definitely has a little bit more abrasion resistance that it can offer. It's also great for sunlight exposure too. As far as feel goes, comparing the two, how they feel, nylon's going to be a little bit softer, a little bit slicker. Polyester thread's going to be slightly rougher. You have to think of what it's serving here too. If it can handle the elements, so to speak, it's definitely going to have that little bit more tough feel to it. This is going to be the choice for those outdoor types of applications. Great for marine upholstery, awnings, car interiors that might be exposed to sunlight much more, like dashboards, headliners, convertible seats, things like that. So it's just going to handle those elements a lot better. Anything outdoor, tactical, tents, that's going to be a great place to go as well. It's also going to be a little bit more expensive, so it's nice to keep that in mind and know the difference between nylon and polyester, because why spend the prime dollar on a polyester type of UV treated thread where you can maybe opt for a nylon thread if it's not going to be, you know, outdoors and things like that. So I hope that makes sense. But now let's look at some examples of these different weights of threads so you can kind of have an idea of what they look like and feel like, because let's face it, a lot of you at home don't have these thick threads, so it's nice to get that visual. Alrighty, so here we have three really great examples of things you'd probably find in bag making. So this is like a very, very chunky type of canvas. This would be really great for upholstery, pillows, decorative pillows. It has a really great texture. So here, let's analyze these 3 rows of stitching. I know it might be kind of hard to see here. This first row is just going to be a glide 40. And as you can see, it really sinks in. You can barely even see it. But depending on the purpose of the thread, this might work for this project. But ideally, right here, we have a Tex 45. It melts in a lot better. I would use a Tex 45 on something like this because it's going to offer a lot of strength. It's also going to hold up very, very nicely. Now, if I had to do a decorative top stitch finish, here we have Tex 70. And you can see here that even on this chunky type of material, it definitely shows a little bit more of that definition, right? But keep that in mind when we're working with fabrics like this. This is something I see very commonly talked about in the Facebook group, is why do my stitches look so bad? And I look at their fabric and they're using chunky woven fabrics. Here's another great example right next to it. We have some cotton webbing here. Glide 40 on this first row. You can see the stitches are completely getting eaten up and they're crooked and slanted and just not the best. Here we have a Tex 45, which starts to look a lot nicer. Still sinks in a little bit though. And then here we have a Tex 70, which looks a little bit better as well. But just remember, with chunky fabrics, you know, when you're sewing, that can also start to alter those stitches. But when you get with thicker threads, it holds its ground a little bit more. It's less flexible, right? So both of these look very, very nice, just depending on what you're needing and what your limitations are on your machine. This looks really good too. Right over here, this is a very nice example. This is like on a nice cotton canvas, has a good body to it. So in bag making, you would definitely find this more common. Here we have that Glide 40. You can see the stitches aren't super pronounced, but also what's starting to happen here is that kind of like that black thread effect where it's not going to show the stitches very defined. But this is a really nice body to it. So I don't know that I would recommend something like this thin, just depending on how many layers. Maybe for 2 layers, it would be fine. You'd want to make that stitch length nice and tight. But for top stitching, you definitely want to consider sizing up and doing something a little thicker. We have that Tex 45 here. starts to look really good. It's holding its ground. And then this is that Tex 70. It looks very, very thick, and it might almost be too thick. But if we're working with several layers, like if you were doing 4, 5, maybe even 6 layers, these stitches would look incredible because it's really gonna fluff out those stitches as well. So this would be great for 2, 3, maybe even 4, but anything past 4, this is gonna start to look nicer because it's gonna fluff out that stitch quality a little bit better. The Glide 40 is maybe ideal for just piecing 2 layers together, making sure your stitch length and the tension quality is good to make the project withstand. Here's a couple more examples. Here we have cork, we have some lightweight denim, and we have some vinyl. So these are great types of materials where you could use that industrial style thread to really make the stitches pop out. Starting off with the cork, this one right here, we got Glide 40. You can see it's not as defined. Great for construction though, because cork is a very soft type of material. So using a very thick type of thread is not going to be super ideal for something like this. Although for top stitching, you could definitely work with these guys right here. So we have that 40 and we have that 70. The 70 is much thicker. It might be harder to see it in camera, but I really like how this 40 looks. I think 40 would look absolutely beautiful for top stitching on some cork. Here we have some denim, all right? Glide 40 right here, very thin, starts to kind of tilt, doesn't have a lot of structure. Mind you, all of these samples I showed you today are just on 2 layers of the material, all right? So here's that 45, here's that 70. The 70 actually starts to slant too, and that can happen with industrial threads because what's happening is the thread is too thick for the amount of layers that are here. So notice how these stitches look really, really good. Slant maybe a little bit also because it has some texture, but it's definitely more prominent here. That could come down to the needle that we're using, but if we doubled this, I guarantee you those stitches will start to straighten out too because it's just too thick for what we're sewing on. And then this example is definitely my favorite one. Thank you, David, for doing these for me. This right here is Glide 40. This right here is Tex 45, and this right here is Tex 70. So you could imagine how beautiful something like this looks on car seats, upholstery, right? It looks really, really nice. And this is just Tex 70. Imagine doing like a 90 or a 135. Just depends on that high contrast here too. But this is very, very thin. It still looks really good. Would be ideal for bags and putting together, you know, 2 layers at a time. But if you were making straps or something with 4 layers and you wanted it to look nicer, or you're top stitching a bag with several layers, 45 or 70 might be the way to go. It's definitely going to make your stitches a lot more defined, and imagine a strap with something like that stitch right there. That looks like you bought it straight from the store. Another great video that I want to reference is we have a podcast style with actually our Glide rep. It's me, David, and Presley, and we're talking about some of the really popular threads like Glide, Cairo Quilt. I'm going to definitely recommend that you watch that so you can learn about some of the really common home sewing threads too. So check out that video, but always reach out to us if you have any questions. We are JukiJunkies.com. We sell Juki sewing machines, all the parts you need for your Juki sewing machine, as well as a wide variety of threads and notions. So check out JukiJunkies.com for your needs, and always pick up that phone, give us a call, or comment down below if you guys have any questions. We're always trying to help you out and all the different ways you can reach us. Last topic of the video, needles. Needles are super, super important. If you already haven't watched my needles like 101 video that I have, that's going to be linked down for below for you as well. That kind of talks about all the different styles and cuts for home sewing machines. Now, the industrial machines are a whole other ballpark. Maybe one day very soon we'll do a video on that too, but it's really important that you understand the different types of cuts of needles, especially on these guys here, these home sewing machines that you have, because it really makes a difference. I've seen people be very skeptical about it, and I am the living, breathing proof that every person I ever help, when we change the needle cut, it solves a lot of problems. So definitely check out that video, but let's talk about some common needle pairings that I would suggest. So if you're going to be working with canvas, you're going to be working with denim, anything that has like a coarse weave like that, I would definitely recommend working with a denim needle. It's going to be a little bit stronger. It's going to, you know, withstand that type of sewing. And if you're working with like the thicker types of threads, so anything I would say like 30, like Tex 30 and up, I would highly recommend you work with like a 16 or an 18 if you're on the TLs. Now on these machines, on your computerized Juki machines, the biggest needle you can use is a 16, but also your thread range changes a little bit too. So when you're working with anything that's thicker than like a 30 weight or a Tex 30, I would definitely recommend staying with that 16 needle, right? So now let's talk about some of those synthetic materials, things like cork, for example. Cork is a very soft synthetic material, so it's not very hard, not very dense. It's very porous, very soft. So for that, I like to recommend Microtex needles. It's a sharp needle. It's going to cut through that synthetic material, and since it's very soft, that's going to be a very good pairing. Now, Microtex needles usually don't come in like a super wide variety of ranges because they're very sharp and they're not always intended for lots of heavy layers. So if you're working with lots of heavy layers and you need something to go through the project, maybe consider a top stitch needle. Top stitch needles have that larger eye, so they're going to be able to make a bigger loop. So hence, anytime you have skipping stitches, looping, or anything like that, it's a connection issue, right? So try to size up to those top stitch needles. But when you're working with industrial thread, the rule of thumb is always going to be kind of like a 16 and an 18. Although with cork, sometimes you could easily get away with a 14 if you're just doing like 2 layers at a time of that Microtex. That's a good pairing. Now let's talk about synthetic materials like vinyl, leather, clear vinyl, things like that. So with actual leather, there's usually like a diamond cut style needle, which you can use Microtex. You can also use top stitch needles, or you can use vinyl needles. Vinyl needles are really nice because they're usually made out of like a non-stick type of coating, so they help not stick to the fabric, they help cut through it better, and it has that unique diamond shape to be able to cut through the synthetic material. Unlike wovens, that's why like when you're quilting, you use a quilting needle. It has a slight ball point to it, right? Because we kind of want it to go through the weave, not necessarily shred the weave. With synthetic materials, you want that needle to cut through it because synthetic, right? There's no weave, there's nothing for it to go through. Once the hole it's there is there. So keep that in mind. On your industrial sewing machines, this range definitely goes a lot higher. Industrial machines use way thicker needles, different needle systems. So we'll make a whole separate video for that, but just remember that you kind of have to accommodate. It's like an equation. I wish there was a perfect equation that I could share with you, but the thread has to match the needle to the fabric. So like more layers, bigger needle, thicker thread, bigger needle, but not always a super big needle if you're not working with a lot of layers. It can be tricky to find that perfect equation, but just take all this information I'm saying and kind of work your way through it. But I've seen a lot of people make very common mistakes, like they'll be working with cork and they're using like an 80-12 or they're using a 75-11. And I'm like, there's no reason we should be doing that unless you're for some reason working on one layer of cork. Maybe I could see an 80-12, or I see people work with industrial style threads like Tex 40 or Tex 30, and they're working with like a 90-14 or an 80-12, and that's just not going to work, right? We have to help the machine make larger loops for that thread, make your stitch quality look better. So those are big no-nos. Definitely make your thread, your needle size a little bit bigger. Always aim a little bit bigger because the machine's gonna probably not gonna connect stitches. I see that a lot. So there's a lot of things that go into needle recommendations. And then as far as like wovens go, so like cotton, linen, blends, cotton linen blends, working with top stitch needles are always going to be great because they have that larger eye. It just helps feed through. Quilting needles are fine too. Top stitch needles are one of my favorites. I like to recommend those for a lot of different people. But remember, it's important about size. So if you're just piecing, you can work with like an 80-12. That's good too. Me personally, since I piece and do everything with Glide 40, this is a little bit thicker than 50 weight thread. Remember, higher the number, thicker the thread. So I like to work with a 90-14 needle for my piecing. That's just my preference. You could totally do an 80-12 too. But you know, it's with cottons, if you're not working with a lot of layers, you don't need a super big needle. 80-12, 90-14. Now if you start going up in those layers, right, like you're top stitching a bag or you're doing several layers, maybe you're making a bowl cozy, you're gonna wanna start using like a 90-14. You're gonna start wanting maybe considering a 16, right? And that's when you can start considering a top stitch needle, because top stitch needles allow you to not have to go up and use a really big needle and make a really large hole in your project, but the eye is gonna help connect the stitches, right? So it's a lot of things to think about in sewing, right? I know it sounds overly complicated, but it's really not. Just take it as you will. Ask your questions down below and I'll be happy to steer you in the right direction. All right, and that's it. That's the end of the video. Lots of charts, lots of numbers, good amount of math today, and lots of important information. That's just good to know. It's gonna make you a stronger sewer by the end of the day. So I really hope you enjoyed this video. A couple things I wanna address. If I talked way too fast, My apologies. You can turn on the closed captions to follow along that way. Remember, you can always rewind this video, skim through the video as we talk about topics so you can find what you're looking for. But there's also a speed option on this video, so you can slow it down a little bit to your liking, so that way you can understand me a little bit better, because sometimes I get in my auctioneer voice and I get really excited. So make sure you guys like this video, subscribe to our channel, as we are always posting new content for you guys every Sunday. Comment down below if you have any questions for me. You need a little bit of advice, or you have some advice you'd like to share. I don't know everything, so I love to hear advice from you guys, maybe some suggestions for the next Sewing Junkie Lab video that you want to see. But I had so much fun today. I hope you did too, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye.